Welcome to Your Own Ark. Today we're going to be talking about the first stage of the 2-year Supplied and Made Simple, the 3-stage preparedness program, minimum rations. All this information can be found at yourownark.blogspot.com under the 2-year Supply Made Simple. With the minimum rations, what we're talking about here is starting a foundation for your food supply. This is especially for people who are just beginning, who don't have any food storage, not really sure how to get started, don't have the tools to work with on their food storage. So we've broken down what you need: minimum rations, rations meaning survivability, not necessarily the kind of food that you want to eat all of the time, but survivability, which allows you to stay alive, and then while you're alive, then you can continue to build on that foundation. There are other ways to do it. You can buy packages of the freeze-dried food and all those different things. That's great if that's affordable for you, but for most people that's priced out of their ability to do that for their family. We talk about the usage of freeze-dried foods later in stage 2. What I recommend and what I've tried to develop here is how to accomplish in a short amount of time most cost-effective survivability for your family. That's the food storage first stage, the minimum rations. We're going to scroll down here and look at this. Now I'd like you to remember that the prices on these are about 6 months old, and they do not correlate with the current prices. Prices are going up 10-15% every 2 or 3 months for some of these commodities. So when you get to the ordering point and you realize, hey, this is different pricing, that's why. Because the longer we wait, the prices are just continuing to go up because commodity prices are rising. One thing that we talk about with our minimum rations is we want to have a very hearty food that provides the nutrients that we need, and also we can palate. Okay, palatable is important, especially if you're dealing with kids. A really good thing to also remember is if you start to implement some of these things with your current food usage, start to use them now, your body gets used to them, your kids get used to them, and it cuts your food costs down dramatically. So you could cut your monthly food bill in half, which would give you more income that you could spend on food and tools for your preparedness. So there's implementation here with the principles of provident living. When we are making some of these things, buying in bulk and then eating more simple food, it's more nutritious for us. It gets our body used to eating that kind of food. So in a crisis situation when we have to eat that food, we're used to it, and also we can save money so that we can turn around and save that extra money and then spend it on making more preparations. So there's a circular motion there. What I have written out here is this 2-year supply made simple. And not only is it important to have the food, but I start out with having herbs and spices because I like to have good food. So the basic herbs and spices that are recommended here is your chili blend, your garlic powder, your onion powder, cinnamon powder, and cayenne. All of those are really good for spices and can also be used medicinally to help with sicknesses, so they're dual purpose. When we invest in things, we want them to be as useful as possible. Your meals of your minimum ration: for breakfast you'd be eating 9 grain, that's a cracked cereal, every morning with a little bit of raisins. It ends up being about 2 ounces of raisins in your 9 grain cereal. You could sprinkle some cinnamon powder on there. That helps to make it a little more palatable. And for lunch and for dinner, you'd be eating a combination of beans, lentils, and whole corn. Now, and rice. So why do we have that beans, lentils, and whole corn? Well, those are just basic food. They have a long shelf life. They provide nutrients and protein and all the things that you need to live, so that ration keeps you alive, and they're easy to prepare. When we think about the first stage, when we think about preparedness, we have the food, and we also have the tools that are necessary to prepare that food. People tell me, well, I've got 500 pounds of wheat, I'm set. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to make bread. Well, wheat is not bread. Bread we'll talk about in stage 2 because you need more tools to make that. The tools that you need to prepare these meals are a pot and some water and hopefully a heat source. So let's look at, and also salt. Redmond salt, you need a real salt to keep your electrolyte up, and that will keep you alive. Some of the tools that are necessary in this stage There's a list here, a rocket stove, if you're familiar with a rocket stove. These are Gruger rocket stoves. I like these because they're a solid metal construction. They're durable. If they tipped over or fell or dropped off your tailgate or whatever, they're not going to break. Some of the other ones are brick lined or very cheap. If that's cheap in construction, the price is about the same on some of those other ones. But you want to think when you're investing in something that it's going to be durable and it's going to do the job. This you could boil water on, you could run a pressure cooker, any of those things that you need to do with a minimal amount of fuel. That's another aspect of it. Futura pressure cooker is a great investment for using now and also in those situations because it takes a minimum amount of water to prepare your food, where you can cook beans in this with a minimum amount of fuel, not adding any more water. Within about an hour you can have cooked beans. So we're using less fuel and less water in that situation. And I recommend putting everything in the 5-gallon plastic buckets or 6-gallon plastic buckets because they're reusable. A lot of people do the number 10 cans. That's fine, but they're not reusable in the fact that when I empty a bucket of food, I just get another bag of commodity and I dump it in that bucket, reseal the lid, and I'm continuing to use my buckets over and over again. So the tools that we look at when we're going through each stage are very important. We have the rocket stove. We want some immune support, a cast iron pan, a good pot, the Futura pressure cooker, hygiene and toiletries. Those are very important. They need to be on your first stage to get that taken care of. Coats and blankets, a lot of these things you'd have already. An axe or a first aid kit, tarp, plastic buckets, crank lights. I don't recommend a lot of bells and whistles. My philosophy is, how did my grandparents do it? How did they used to do it back in the day? And those principles usually stand strong. Cast iron pans, wood heat, those sorts of things. But every once in a while there are some good innovations. I like the crank lights. They're cheap. You can pick some of these up for $3 and $4 or $5. And then you have an easy way to make light. It's also fun for the kids because they can generate their own light and it gives them something to do. So this is a basic overview of the first stage, those minimum rations, building that foundation. This price was the price that totaled up to as of, that would have been June 2013. So those prices have gone up. It's probably closer to about $550 or so right now. But again, this is still the basic way to do this. You get started with this foundation. People say, well, I don't like to eat rice and beans and lentils. But you realize this is 2-year supply for 2 people for $500. Okay, 2-year supply for 2 people. So you're having a big foundation. Now, on top of that foundation, we're going to talk about building on it, but you have to have the foundation first. The brethren have talked about building a food supply of basic commodities that will sustain life. As we sustain life, then we have the options to continue to build, perhaps plant a garden, and move forward with the things that are important. But we have to be able to sustain life sufficient time-wise so that we can rebuild in different areas. This foundational level is not fun. These things aren't really fun to eat. There's not a lot of bells and whistles associated with this, but you can accomplish this, put it in buckets and stack it in a corner, and you're done, and you have the security of knowing that you have sufficient food for your family in case of a disaster, or when that disaster comes. I don't say in case of, because it is inevitable that we will use these things. And you can do that, making that choice for yourself. This has been yourownark.blogspot.com. If you have any questions, check us out online. Thank you.